All right, it's Dogs versus Tide in a clash of the Titans. It's a remix. It's a rematch. Let's get it. Believe in dogs. All right, welcome into the Believe in Georgia Dogs podcast on the Believe Network. Thank you for joining. Happy Thursday evening. Israel is he's in football land. Things are happening down in Georgia because of this storm. So first of all, I want to jump off and say, I hope everyone remains safe. Wherever you're listening from, if you're in the South Georgia, Florida area, or anywhere in the path of Hurricane Helene, hope you guys stay safe. I hope you guys are taking precautions. Hope everyone is evacuating if that is a necessary move for you. So hopefully everybody's safe. Hopefully everything goes. Hopefully everything's okay. So Israel's dealing with that stuff. I think they played last night, so they may be tying up some loose ends there. So he's not going to join us here tonight. So he'll probably have to catch us on a later date. Maybe tomorrow we might jump back on here and do a little preview, or if not, worst case scenario, probably just we'll catch back up with you next week. Hopefully things are back to normal a little bit. But this episode is brought to you by betonline.ag, your number one source for all of your sports wagering needs. That's right. Yeah. BetOnline, it's the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet during the games. So do you think you know your stuff? Well, you can get in on the $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and your share of $200,000. So when the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. So head to the website today, get in on the action, bet online. The game starts here. So yeah, it's this is interesting, and this is something that I'm excited about this game because a lot of people are claiming that this game is going to be, it's all Alabama, and this is based on the way Georgia played against Kentucky. We didn't get a chance. We schedules just misaligned here, but we didn't get a chance to come on and talk about the Kentucky game. But just the way Georgia played against Kentucky is, when you look at the performance there, and the offense kind of struggled a little bit. It was a road environment. Everything was a little bit off. This was Kentucky's Super Bowl. This was Brock Vandagriff's Super Bowl especially. So Georgia didn't play extremely well in that game. And I don't think it's indicative of what kind of team they are, or I don't think it's any indication of how the rest of the season's going to go. Georgia's season always goes like this, where they come out first game most of the time. If they're playing like an Oregon or a Clemson or somebody, they come out and just rip them apart, and then they kind of get in that early to mid-season struggle. They always have a road game somewhere that you're just like puzzled. You're like, that's just weird that they lost that game. But Kentucky is that game. And anytime the game is at Kentucky, especially if it's at night, that's going to be the game that you can go, okay, well, Georgia's going to struggle in this one. No matter what the spread is, the spread could be 3.5. The spread could be 33.5. They're not going to cover it. And so it's just a weird matchup. They just struggle. I don't know why. And Mark Stoops is a really, really good coach as far as defensive scheme. I just don't know that he's figured out how to put it all together just yet. He had a really good coordinator in Liam Cohen, and lost him to the NFL, which that happens, right? You do well at your job, and the NFL comes calling. It's the best of the best. So not surprised there, but you get in a game situation like that, and they play hard, and Georgia just didn't respond really that well. and at times. I think they did enough to win the game, but I just don't think they responded all that well as far as what to do, how to play. Some situations where they just couldn't seem to get on the same page, and some of that was they just still are unsure what to do without Brock Bowers, without Ladd McConkey, and without Kendall Milton and Dejon Edwards. So some of the key pieces in offense being gone off into the NFL or off just they've graduated and moved on. Georgia just hadn't figured it out yet. They haven't figured out what kind of weapon they have with ETN. He's still trying to get in his groove after being suspended for the first game. You've got receivers that are trying to get on the same page. You've got offensive linemen that are trying to communicate and get on the same page. And Carson Beck just hasn't seemed to kind of figure out what his part is in putting it all together just yet. But I think once they finally do, and they eventually will, this weekend would be a great place to start. But they'll be fine, right? Because Georgia, they haven't given up a touchdown yet. They haven't. It's a pretty impressive stat. That's a pretty impressive stat. They've given up 2 field goals against Clemson, or 1 field goal against Clemson. But this is you're looking at a team that again is Alabama. They're loaded up. They've kind of struggled a little bit too. But this game's interesting, right? This game is one of those where you're just looking at it and going, what do we want to do here? Right? Yeah, they haven't given up a touchdown yet. Kentucky scored 12 points on all field goals. Tennessee Tech and Clemson both only scored 3 points. So I had to double check that because when you say things like that, you're just like, are you really sure of that? So anyway, but the tail of the tape on this one, right? This is Alabama. A lot of people are like, well, they struggled against South Florida. They haven't looked like the same Alabama teams of old. It's been a little bit a rough transition to get to Kalen DeBoer from Nick Saban, which was always going to happen no matter who you had there. That was going to be a struggle. It just is. Nick Saban's the greatest to ever do it. You're going to go this way when he retires, when he left. Everyone knew that. But they're still loaded with talent. They're still good. They're still Kalen DeBoer is a really good coach. People need to realize that when they're talking about Alabama. He's a really, really good coach. He had Washington in the national championship. He knows how to scheme. We'll see if he knows how to recruit at the SEC level. That remains to be seen. But he can develop a quarterback. He's really good with scheme. He's really good with personnel relating, all that good stuff. He's a really good coach. These guys will play hard for him. These guys have already played hard for him. So both teams have had games where you're just confused as to why it was even close. With Alabama, it was that way with South Florida. At one point, you're like, is South Florida going to actually pull this out and win this game? And they didn't. And I don't think anybody thought they were actually going to do it. But at some point, you looked at it and went, everyone had that thought. They're going to win this game. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I think when you look at this game, again, it is 2 teams that are extremely loaded, not playing. It's kind of one of these roller coaster numbers. They're not playing their best, but they're certainly not playing their worst either. But you have Jalen Milroe and you have Carson Beck. That is the quarterback matchup. That is the rematch from the SEC title game. That is something you're looking at and going, okay, here we go. Here's the quarterbacks, right? Jalen Milroe, can he do it against the nation's #1 pass defense? He's hadn't thrown an interception yet. He's a third-rated passer in FBS. Jalen Milroe is off to a really good start. And he's a quarterback that almost got benched at this point last year. He's a quarterback that probably should have been benched at this point last year. So it's one of those things where this defense is going to have its hands full with that. He's thrown for 590 yards, 8 touchdowns. Again, no interceptions. That's not a typo. He's also scored 6 on the ground as well. He's always been a threat to run, fast, explosive guy. Got really improved tremendously as a passer and just as a quarterback overall. So credit to Kalen DeBoer on developing that. So this is this is going to be an interesting matchup because I really like the way this Georgia defense plays. Again, they haven't given up a touchdown yet. They've given up some chunk plays against Kentucky. They've bent, but they haven't broken and given up a touchdown. So Malachi Starks, he is allowing. He's the key to a defense that is allowing just 91 yards a game through the air. Hasn't given up a touchdown at all, but hasn't given up a passing one through Malachi Starks. Made an incredible interception, reminiscent of the one from the Oregon game 2 years ago. Malachi Starks had another one against Clemson. He's just a tremendous athlete back there at safety, man. He's an eraser back there, man. He can really make up a lot of ground. He can cover just about anybody. If you need him to play low in like a cover one type situation, you need to cover a slot receiver. He's good down near the box. He's physical. He's good as a free safety. He can cover a lot of ground. And he's somebody that I think can match speed for speed with Jalen Milroe if he wants to try to run and try to get on the edge. So this is again a game where you're hoping Michael Williams will play. He's questionable. And this is a game where this defense can really shine. This Georgia team, there's a lot at stake for Georgia as far as they have to show. They have to show that they're worthy of this. Well, they were number one, but they have to show that they're worthy of this number one spot that they used to have, right? It got taken away from them because Texas played better against Michigan. And Georgia struggled against Kentucky. That's the only reason they're number 2 now, and Texas is number 1. That's the only reason. Certainly, it hadn't been any other game. So this is going to be a game for Carson Beck to prove. He's 6-1 against top 20 teams, and the only loss is Alabama, which returns a lot of the players that were on last year's team. I'm sure they are just happy to see Dallas Turner leave. He was a pain in their ass. He was so disruptive, man. They're glad to see him gone, but he's thrown for 1,900 yards with 15 touchdowns, just 2 interceptions in those 7 ranked matchups. So he's been electric in those games. So the bigger the game, the more locked in he is, which is good and a problem all at the same time. So he's going to be really good. So like I said, it's a battle of the quarterbacks, man. Who can take care of the ball? Who can have the poise? Like, can Carson Beck have the poise on the road? Like, that's going to be an important quality. He's got to be able, when those 100,000 Roll Tiders are singing Dixieland Delight, they're saying F Auburn, LSU, and Tennessee too, and Georgia, you suck, and they're singing, they're going crazy, and you can't hear yourself think. Your thoughts can't hear themselves think. It's so loud. You've got to have the poise to be able to stand and deliver. There's going to be a 3rd and 6 somewhere in that game that's going to be crucial, and that crowd is going to be jacked up. And you got to stand and deliver. You got to have the poise. Mike Bobo, I think he's at his best as a coordinator when his foot is on the pedal. When he gets super conservative, which he does at times, foot's got to be on the gas on this one, right? You've got to take it to Alabama. So that's one of the keys. If you're going to win this game, the key is stand on the gas pedal. Aggressive. Force Alabama to adjust to your tempo. Force them to play your game, not the other way around. Force them to play your game. And that's how you're going to win this, right? Force them into your tempo. Offensively, make them react to you, okay? Don't react to them. Don't let them dictate anything for the offense. You have to establish the run. Etienne, Robinson, and Frazier are going to all have to have tremendous game collectively as a rushing unit. If they're going to win this game, they have to establish a ground game that establishes a little bit of control of the clock and a little bit of control of field position, and it opens up opportunities in the pass game. Oscar Delp they got to fill that they got to fill that Brock Bowers void somehow. And it's got to be collectively between Oscar Delp and Dominic Lovett and Colby Young. Like it's got to be, and Colby Young I think Colby Young's out with mono. I think some guys are out with mono, but there's got to be something. Run game, pass game, tight ends, something. I think what's plaguing this Georgia offense, and even the Clemson game was rough to start because I just don't think that this offense has really found their identity and who their go-to guy is. I mean, last year it was, where's 19? Where's Bowers? Where's McConkey? Where's 84? Right? It's, Carson Beck had those safety nets. You knew it was going to be Kendall Milton, Dejon Edwards, and you're going to throw some passes to Bowers and McConkey, and you're going to go, and occasionally there's going to be some other guys. Like Arian Smith was the deep shot guy, and Dominic Lovett was a guy that got involved sporadically but effectively. And they don't have that this year. They've got to figure out, okay, what can ETN really do? What can Branson Robinson really do? What can Zach Frazier, somebody that's been really good for them, especially in the opener against Clemson. He kind of went off. Dylan Bell, you got to involve him. Dominic Lovett, Arian Smith has got to be more involved. So some of these guys, you have to figure out ways to get them involved and get them part of your offense. Like you got to figure out. I just don't think that's where they are yet. Their defense has been carrying them. They've been scoring just enough. They've been doing just enough. But now they've got to put it all together. If they're going to beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa, they've got to figure that out. That's key. If they don't, well, it's going to be rough, right? It's going to be, I think Alabama's good enough to be able to make them pay for not being able to figure out, okay, well, we don't really know what our identity is because we don't have anybody to emerge to help us identify that. ETN's got to come out. He's got to have a big game. If Georgia's going to be good, if they're going to be good throughout the season, if they're going to make a playoff run, ETN's got to be a big part of that. Georgia's got to be able to run the ball, or they need to go get a new coordinator, because what Mike Bobo presumably wants to do, I just don't really know kind of where he's at. I don't know what he wants to do. I don't know the identity of this team. I really don't. And it's going to be a 3-loss. You've got 3 legitimate losses sitting out there, possibly 4 with Tennessee, if you don't figure that out, right? If you can figure that out, you still might lose 1. You still might even lose 2. But if you don't figure it out, you're really going to struggle against Texas. You're going to struggle against Ole Miss because you got to keep up with them. And you're going to struggle against Tennessee because you got to keep up with them, right? And so if you don't figure it out, you're toast, because your defense is going to get exhausted. And you don't have Mykel Williams right now. Probably not going to have him this game. You're probably realistically not going to have him until next week at Auburn, or against Auburn. Auburn's coming to Athens. But it's got to be offensively. You got to figure out what your identity is. You've got to figure out how to attack this Crimson Tide defense. So the cornerbacks are young. You have chances to get them. It's fairly early in the season. You have a chance to really pick on those guys and push the ball downfield a little bit. You got to be aggressive defensively. In the run game, it's a little bit stingier. Alabama's always stingy there. But again, there's opportunity. I think if you can get Alabama on their heels with some tempo and things like that, and just kind of getting in a rhythm, you can really kind of put them on their heels, and you can really kind of start to open up some run game, kind of like what you did to Clemson. You just got to be patient with it as well. So offensively, it's going to be interesting. All right. Defensively, I think you have to obviously key on Jalen Milroe. He's such a multifaceted quarterback right now that you have to kind of figure out how to stop him, and you have to figure out, okay, well, he can hurt us. He can hurt us running. He's always been able to do that. So we've got to be able to close up run lanes. We've got to be able to have guys win on an island. Like if you've got to have guys make open field tackles one-on-one, like you've got to have that, because you're going to be put in those situations to where you have to make those plays, and you better be able to make them, or Milroe's going to burn you. No doubt about it. Okay. Passing game wise, you can't let him step up in the pocket. You have to collapse the pocket from the inside. you have to contain him, and to be able to contain him, you can't run past him. You can't be undisciplined in your rush angles and things like that. You have to close things in on him, force him to pinball around in there trying to find a way out, and get out on the edge and run. If you give him those opportunities, he can make you pay there. And then, of course, disrupt his throwing lanes. Make sure you're knocking around the receivers a little bit. Obviously not getting pass interference and not doing things illegally, but make sure you're knocking those receivers around a little bit as well. Again, we just don't know, beyond Ryan Williams, who was not alive the last time Alabama was a road underdog, was a home underdog. Ryan Williams wasn't even born yet, so go figure. But they've got to figure out ways to affect the passing game. They've got to get in. Jalen Milroe's face. They've got to beat him around a little bit. They've got to knock him down. They've got to stop him from being able to get in a rhythm. And same with Alabama's defense against Carson Beck. They've got to really kind of get in his face and get him out of rhythm, because Kentucky did that and they were fairly successful in being able to defend Georgia. I think Georgia's got to be able to do that. Stop the run, stop the big plays, make Alabama drive the football. If they're going to score, make them drive the football. Okay. And you don't say that about a lot of teams, but there's teams that are built to drive the football, and there's teams that aren't built to drive the football. And I don't think at this moment, I don't think Alabama's built to drive the football every single series. Like, if they have to go out each and every possession and drive the ball 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 plays every single time, they're not going to score a ton. They're going to struggle. They're going to give the ball away. They're going to do some things, right? You have to be able to make them methodically every time drive the ball. You've got to make them labor to get points. Again, it's a strategy that's just universal football. So I know I'm probably not breaking any ground here, but for Alabama, they can certainly drive the football. They can certainly do it. They're good enough to be able to, but series in and series out doing that, you can't, if you limit the big plays to make them almost non-existent, then you should be able to have a little bit of success against Alabama as far as making them, limiting their points, limiting their explosive play rate. So for Georgia's defense, they have to key in on Ryan Williams. They have to figure out ways to, they're still not a great zone team. They still don't communicate very well in zone coverage. There's been some coverage busts. There was some coverage bust against Kentucky, but they still have to kind of shore up a little bit too. If they're going to make the passing game difficult for Alabama, they have to do that. They have to limit that, and they have to make sure that Alabama is not able to get out and just throw the ball all around the yard on them. So it's interesting. It's going to be an interesting game. It's going to come down to some massive coaching decisions. There's going to be some special teams plays that I think are going to turn the tide, like a punt return. If Georgia or Alabama can control the field, that helps. Like if the starting field position is lopsided or time of possession is lopsided in either way, that's going to be a massive factor. I think Georgia has the better shot at being able to control the clock. Alabama's more of an explosive play type team where they're reliant on the explosive plays to kind of get them down the field. Georgia's more of a drive the ball type team. Georgia has to, Georgia's offense is built to be able to drive the ball, control things like that. Even if they're not scoring, they're built to be able to drive, get a few first downs, eat the clock or bleed the clock and punt it away if they have to. They have a defense that's good enough to where they're not scared to punt. And they're not scared to punt a lot. Against Kentucky, they knew their defense was going to prevail, even though they were a little bit scary at a couple points. But they just know that Georgia, if Alabama wants a chance against Georgia, they have to make them drive a long field every single time. They have to keep them inside the 20. Starting position every single time. Like if Alabama, if they're not going to score, if they can move the ball enough to get to where they can punt them and pin them deep every single time, if they can make their average starting position inside the 20, they have a really good chance. Because any team driving a long field is never in a high percentage. So this is again, we're looking at. I think it's gonna be a tight game. I think when you look at the scores, I think you're gonna kind of be in the. I think you're gonna be in the 20s. Both defenses are going to be really jacked up. They're going to be really good. I think these quarterbacks are going to throw their first interceptions. Again, I think Georgia will give up their first touchdown of the season. Jalen Milroe will throw his first pick of the season. And these teams it's going to be a slugfest, man. I think it's going to be Georgia 27, Alabama 21. I think it's going to be one of those kind of slugfest where both teams play really well at times, and both teams at a certain point you're like, God, this is setting football back about 20 years. But again, it's going to live up to its billing as early on game of the year, game of the month, game of the whatever. I think this is going to be a really good game. Win, lose, or draw for Georgia. I think I think you can keep a lot of your respect intact if you even if you lose this game, which with the playoff indications, with what's happened, I don't think they can lose this game because of what's looming down the pike with Texas and Ole Miss and Tennessee. Very tough schedule, actually. So, but I think Georgia prevails in this one. I think they at least get to Texas, and then Texas is going to be an interesting game when they get there. And we're going to see what Texas is going to do to Mississippi State. That's not going to be pretty. So we'll see that. But before I wrap up, I say we because I'm used to having Israel here. But before I wrap up, I'm gonna get into a few picks for the weekend. I'm gonna go through some of these lines around the league. So again, my prediction for Georgia, they're going to cover the spread. Obviously, they're going to win 27-21 on the road. I think they're going to avenge it. I just don't think Kalen DeBoer is, this being his first big matchup. I think this is going to be a learning experience for him. I'm not calling him a bad coach. I'm not saying all that stuff, but I think he does get slightly outcoached here. So give me Georgia 27, Alabama 21. All right. Now we look at some of the other scores. And as I'm recording this live on a Thursday night, the Giants and Cowboys are locked up in a good one there. One of the games I'm intrigued by, Ole Miss and Kentucky. Ole Miss is 16-point favorites over Kentucky. Now, knowing what we know defensively about Kentucky, they're pretty stingy and they can get after you. But their offense is so bad that I think Ole Miss will be able to wear them down defensively because their defense is going to be out on the field a lot. So that's an interesting game there. I'm going to go with Ole Miss. And the over-under set at 53. I'm going to stay away from the over-under, but I'm going to take Ole Miss in the spread. Another game I'm interested in here is the other game I'm interested in. I'm scrolling, Oklahoma and Auburn. I think this is, according to Bet Online, it's a 1-point spread. So it is basically a pick 'em. The over-under set at 44.5. I'd be more inclined to take the under, and I'm going to take Oklahoma because both these teams are pretty bad, really bad quarterback play. Auburn is a complete mess. Venables, I think, is a little bit in over his head as far as being a head coach, as a defensive coordinator, defensive mind. He's probably one of the best in college football history. But, as a head coach, you're responsible for the whole operation. And so he failed to realize that. I think Will Muschamp is the same way. When he was at Florida, when he was at South Carolina, their offenses just weren't great because he kind of neglected them a little bit. But I do think Oklahoma wins this one because I just think they're a little bit more stable than Auburn. I think Auburn's quarterback play is a lot worse, and I think Oklahoma can do a few things on offense. They're just not very explosive, and they just don't score a lot. But I think they can do a little bit. They ran into a bit of a buzzsaw against Tennessee last week, but they're still in pretty good shape there. Arkansas and A&M. This is a really interesting one because Arkansas goes into the Plains last week and beats Auburn, right? And now they're going to Jerry's World. I think this is the last game in Jerry's World for this Southwest Conference Classic. Arkansas and A&M. Man, this is an interesting one because Arkansas is a very explosive team, but they're a team that's so wildly inconsistent that they can't seem to kind of hold things together. Like they're the team that's going to take 2 steps forward, 3 steps backwards, and then they're going to take 10 steps forward, 5 steps backwards, and they're going to take 2 steps forward and 10 steps backwards. Like it's just one of those where you just don't really know series to series offense what they're going to do, series to series defense. Are they going to get pressure? Are they going to be, they're just they just their identity offensively. You know what they're going to do. Their quarterback plays just inconsistent. He has accuracy issues a little bit. New starter, it's one of those things. But A&M is a team that we don't quite know what their identity is, offensively or defensively. They're still trying to figure out Coach Elko, so there's that factor involved there. So, A&M's 6-point favorites in that game. I'm gonna go ahead and take them in this one because I think they're probably athletically a little bit better and talent depth wise a little bit deeper than Arkansas is. And I think ultimately that'll win out. So Mississippi State and Texas, that's going to be a bloodbath. Not really interested in that game. You have LSU, USA. USA, it's 20.5 points. It was 22.5 points. It has gone down since. So there's going to be some money. There's going to be some action on South Alabama. I like that pick. I think South Alabama, they can score the ball. LSU, I think it's going to have to be an extremely high-scoring game for LSU to be able to cover this spread. I think LSU is going to have to get in the mid-40s at minimum to be able to cover this spread because I think South Alabama can score. So that's going to be interesting there. I think they cover it because, if they win by 20, it's not a cover. And I think if they win 40-20, it's not going to be a cover. So they win 30-10, that's not a cover, right? So it's a lot of points. So I'm going to take the points in that one. The battle for New Mexico supremacy. New Mexico's favored in that one because all of New Mexico State's team is in Nashville now. So that's an interesting one there. The battle of New Mexico. That'll be fun. So, but that's going to do it for me here on the Believe in Georgia Dogs podcast on the Believe Network. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining me. Make sure you like, subscribe, give us feedback, all that good stuff. We'll see you back here next time on the Believe in Georgia Dogs podcast on the Believe Network. Thank you. Take care. Be safe. And, of course, go Dogs.